dear students, myself Gangadhar Solanke, and I welcome you all to the MCGM's virtual classroom. Today in Standard 7th Geography, we'll be learning the chapter Tides. If you stay near the coast or visit any sea coast, then you will realize that the sea water is sometimes very close to the coast, while at other times it is far away from the coast. It means that there is change in the place of water, and it is because of the movements of sea water, and these movements in the sea water called tides, or in other words we can say tides are movements of sea water occurring daily and regularly. The level of sea water changes after a specific period of time. After every 12 hours and 25 minutes, a cycle of high tide and low tide gets completed. So how much time it takes? 12 hours and 25 minutes. After 12 hours and 25 minutes, a cycle of high tide and low tide gets completed. So all the coasts on the earth experience tides. High and low tides are natural phenomena, and this is result of, or which is directly related to, the sun, the moon and the earth, and also the gravitational and centrifugal forces that interact between them. It means all these things, the sun, the moon and the earth, and also the gravitational and centrifugal forces, and interaction between all these things causes tides. Now, to understand the relation or the interaction between all these things, first of all we'll try to understand the concept of centrifugal force. Due to its rotation, the earth gets a type of power or force, and this force works away from the center. And when any force which works away from the center, then it is called centrifugal force, which means going away from the center. Center से दूर जाना. And the gravitational force, which is working towards the center of the earth at the same time. As you can see on the screen, centrifugal force through different images, it is explained there. But then the question is, what is the difference between the intensity of centrifugal force and the gravitational force? Due to its rotation, the earth gets a type of power or force, and this force works away from the center. फिर हम अर्थ से दूर क्यों नहीं जाते हैं? If there is centrifugal force, it is because as there is centrifugal force, there is gravitational force also, and this gravitational force, which is many times greater than the centrifugal force. Hence, any object on the surface of earth remains at the place where it exists. हम जहां पर है वहीं रहते. It is because of gravitational force. And now the factors which are responsible for the occurrence of tides: the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun, as well as that of the moon. It means that the gravitational pull or gravitational force of the moon, सिर्फ मून का ही नहीं, सन का भी, एंड एज वेल एज दैट ऑफ द अर्थ, तीनों का ग्रेविटेशनल पुल, तीनों का ग्रेविटेशनल फोर्स जो है, उसकी वजह से tides are there. Then in this, the next one or the next factor, evolution of the earth around the sun and the indirect revolution of the moon around the sun, and centrifugal force generated due to the rotation of the earth. So the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun, then the revolution of the earth and centrifugal force, all these things are responsible for the occurrence of tides. Now here, as you can see in the image, occurrence of tides, here moon you can see, which is closer to the earth than the sun, hence its gravitational force becomes more effective than that of sun. So tides occur due to the relative positions of the moon, the sun and the earth. Moon की position, sun की position and position of the earth. A place on the earth located at the opposite point of the place experiencing high or low tide, which also experiences high or low tide respectively at the same time. And this is because of the centrifugal force. Again, by one more image, you can easily understand this. Occurrence of tides due to the relative positions of the earth, of the sun and of the moon, and also because of the gravitational force and of the centrifugal force. Now the next point, types of tides. As the timing of the tide varies every day, the range of a tide also keeps on changing, and the highest high tide occurs on full moon and new moon, whereas on the days of the first and the third quarter the high tide is at its minimum. So according to this, spring tides and neap tides are the two types of tides. Now what is exactly difference between the spring tides? Rise very high and fall very low. New moon days and full moon days, it occurs on new moon days and full moon days. And when sun, moon and earth are in straight line, in the first one you can see the image of spring tides where the moon, the sun and the earth are in straight line. Now about the neap tides, neither rise very high nor fall very low. Quarter moon days, it occurs on quarter moon days, and the sun, moon and earth are in right angle. By the pointer I am showing you how it is in the position of right angle, and which causes neap tides. One more image to study in detail about the spring tides. On new moon day and on full moon days, the gravitational pull of the sun and the moon. So the gravitational pull of not only the sun but also the moon act on the same direction, and due to this the total pull increases. Hence the tide on these days is much higher than the average high tide, and this is known as spring tide. एवरेज हाई टाइड जो होती है उससे भी बहुत ज़्यादा टाइड इस दिन हमें देखने को मिलती है, एंड दैट टाइड इज कॉल्ड स्प्रिंग टाइड. The water level during spring tide is higher than the average high tide and lower than the average low. And neap tide, because of the position of the moon, where the moon makes a right angle with respect to the earth and the sun twice a month, this position occurs on the first and the third quarter of each month. On both these days, the forces of both the sun and the moon operate at right angles on the earth. If you observe this figure carefully, then you can understand the position of the sun, of the moon and of the earth. By this you can understand the neap tide. Fall in water level is less than usual at the time of low tide. This is because the attraction of the sun and the moon are not complementary but at right angles to each other, and such tides are called neap tides. In the image again you can see, in spring tide it is very high and very low, but in neap tide it is not very high and not very low. Figures or images are always good to understand the concept or to keep in mind the basic things. Neap tides are a little lower than the average high tides and little higher than the average low tides. Now again one more image to understand the exact difference between the positions of the sun, of the moon and of the earth during spring tide and of neap tide. Next point, effects of tides. The tides clear the west and hence the coasts become clean. Important thing or the important effect of the tides, which naturally cleans the coast. With the high tide, fish move into the creeks and this helps fishing activity. Now this one is good thing for the fishes but not good for the fish. Ports do not get filled with sediments due to tides. Ships can move up to the ports during high tide. During high tide, seawater can be stored in salt pans from which salt can be obtained. These are the very basic things about the effects of tides. The tidal force can be used to generate electricity. Very important one. You can generate electricity by using the tidal force. A lack of an understanding of the timings of high and low tides may cause accidents to swimmers entering the sea. So it is always very important to give information about the timings of high and low tides. Otherwise it may cause accidents. The tides help in maintaining the mangroves and the coastal biodiversity. As it is a natural phenomenon, naturally many things are dependent on each other, and tide is one of that. Then the next thing, daily tide cycle. The tides are continuously occurring phenomena, and after reaching the maximum water level during high tide, the low tide sets in, and when after reaching the lowest water level during the low tide, the high tide sets in, and this occurs naturally. So most seashores have 4 tides every day, 2 high tides and 2 low tides. A change of from low to high tide or vice versa takes about 6 hours and 12 minutes. So changes in tides can be drastic, easily noticeable और less dramatic. जो कभी समझ में आते हैं तो कभी समझ में नहीं आ सकते हैं. It depends. But keep in mind it is a natural phenomena. So in the next session we'll talk about the remaining part of the lesson, that is waves. Subscribe the channel and press bell icon to get notifications. So my dear ones, this is all for today. Thank you very much. Stay home, stay safe, take care.